My name's Jon Hamm. I'm a future member of the Khosla team starting July 15th. So delighted about that. Thank you. I've actually been working with Khosla informally for, the better part of 7 or 8 years. Been on a couple Khosla boards, and I've coached about 7 or 8 Khosla CEOs. Vinod and Samir just formalized it by asking me to join the firm and spend about half my time in the portfolio. And I have an independent CEO coaching practice outside that. So quick background on me. I started in the Valley when the first IBM PC shipped in 1983. It was a good day. And worked for a series of infrastructure companies as an executive. I worked for Hewlett Packard and Western Digital. Then I was on the original team at Adaptec that went public in 1990 in the storage infrastructure space. And I was one of the co-founders of a company called Brocade, which did storage area networks we started in 1995, went public in 99. And I did one more venture-backed company with IVP in Mayfield as CEO with a guy called Gordon Ritter, who's now at Emergence Capital. Gordy and I did a company called Whistle, and we were acquired by IBM in year 2000. I was CEO of that company. So after being acquired by IBM as the CEO, I spent my year there. Actually spent 364 days there, to be perfectly honest, because my 365th day was a Sunday. So I didn't have to stay for that last day of the year that they made me stay. I worked with Lou Gerstner there to design the IBM Ventures function, which we brought to the Valley. And then I started doing portfolio coaching at Redpoint and ICG. And then I wrote this book in 2011, went on book tour for a year. And then I've been coaching CEOs ever since. So I've coached from Fortune 50 to seed stage CEOs. I have a little bit of a big data advantage, given that I've worked with about 100 CEOs over the last decade. So I've seen some things that work spectacularly well and spectacularly bad. And mostly I'm a good database. So I will show you some patterns and some other things. So the other thing I'll say in defense of my charts is that I want you to know these were turned in 3 days ago. And the reason I say that is because a bunch of the speakers said some stuff on my charts. And I want you to know I didn't hear that before I wrote it. I wrote it before I heard it, just so I wasn't stealing. But you will see a lot of things on here that were mentioned by a lot of the speakers. So Dan and I chose a couple topics we thought would be germane to the conversation. It's a short session. It's 40 minutes. I have a 4:30 flight to New York. If I miss it, I have middle seats only on the 5:30, the 10:30, and the 11:30. So I have a great seat on the 4:30. I have really bad seats on the ones after that. So I'm going out that door at 3:30 or whatever time, 3 o'clock. So we picked a couple topics, and I'll just run without Dan. These were the 2 topics we thought were always on people's minds. I've been doing CEO leadership coaching for a decade, so I have a point of view about how it works, what it is. How many of you have had some coaching or advisory support, mentors, people? Good. So that's what I want to hear. I want to hear your experiences as well. We're trying to build sort of a shared vision of what this is. And then we're going to talk about building C-suite teams. I mean, Sam talked about this morning. Everybody's talked about this. I'm going to make some bold assertions about how critical that is. Here's Dan. So Dan and I decided to do this where I would sort of call some plays, and then he would provide some color commentary. As you know, Dan was this chief operating officer of Box during the height of their growth and their real success with Aaron. So let me just jump in and say, I'm going to talk a little bit about performance coaching. And notice I didn't say CEO coaching. I'm going to make this generic to what does it mean to get coached in performing at anything. So I'm going to unpack these 7 things for you. The desire here is that you either agree, disagree, or have a different point of view. That's the dialogue I want. Yes, I agree. No, I don't agree, and here's why. Or I think about this completely differently. So that's what we're going to try and do after I get through. But this is really fire starter stuff. I'm going to unpack these 7 things. I think performance coaching in anything, playing an instrument, playing a sport, being a CEO, being a chef, is all about getting better faster. Because the truth is, everyone in this room, everyone I know, is going to get better at anything they do. Okay? So if there's no sense having a 3-year training program if the Olympics is in 2 years. Right? So this is really about getting better faster. I'll unpack that a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about adding contextual quotient to intelligence and emotion. We talk a lot about IQ, a lot about EQ. I want to add something called the contextual quotient. Dan, you want to jump in and say, okay, good. He knows when to jump in. He and I have done this dance before. I would argue that at the leadership level, success is really the sum of the decisions we make over time and how well we execute. One of the speakers talked about problem solving. I think it was Instagram, was Kevin, right? He talked about just building a problem solving machine. So chat on that a little bit. I have a fundamental belief that important, difficult decisions benefit from rigorous dialogue. Now, if you're a go to the mountaintop kind of person, you and I are going to agree to disagree here. My experience is that every time I've thought I had something right, having a rigorous conversation with another smart person about it, at a minimum added some value to it. Maybe I was going to do what I did anyhow, but I'm just a believer that when you're playing high stakes poker, you want to get every advantage you can get. And that includes having rigorous dialogue with other smart people. That was also brought up a bunch of times in the last 2 days, right? Too busy is the lame excuse ever. So I'm going to unpack these. Getting better faster to me is about bending the learning curve. It's really about not trusting on-the-job training to get you there fast enough. I mean, the reality is we're collecting experience, we're learning from it. I think when you put yourself in a performance coaching environment, whatever that means to you, and I can talk about it, you're going to have somebody help you bend your learning curve. So much like a personal trainer, right? They make you show up at the gym, they show you some exercises you didn't know, and they're probably going to make you lift more weight than you would have by yourself. So what are they doing? They're bending your learning curve. They're bending your performance curve. They're putting you in that environment more often with more rigor. They're teaching you some things you might not have known about lifting weights or doing whatever you do in the gym. And they're probably going to make you do it a little bit harder than you would have done it yourself. So this is a simple equation. We've known it for hundreds of years, but we're trying to get better faster, not just get better. So if you believe that, then you believe why you'd want some help doing that. If you think about IQ and EQ, intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, we know lots about these. I think for a lot of smart people, they see the world so brilliantly to begin with, they don't think that hard about other perspectives. But the reality is that so much of the problem that we're about to solve is how we see it. So I coached a CEO for many years, a guy called Dave DeWalt. I don't know whether any of you know Dave, but he started at Documentum, then he went to McAfee, and then he was CEO of FireEye. And when I was coaching Dave, I bought him a miner's hat. It was like one of those green things with a flashlight on the front. And I gave it to him. I said, Dave, you're gonna solve every problem you're looking at. I just want to make sure you know what you're looking at and how you're looking at it. Because he was so capable that it wasn't a matter of whether he was going to make something better. It was a matter of what he decided to look at to make better. So a lot of this is how we see it. A great phrase, we don't see things the way they are, but rather the way we are. So this is about owning our own bias, knowing our own weaknesses, the way we would see something. Product people think all problems are a product problem, right? So it's not about it good or bad. It's about appreciating that your point of view is the only one you can have by definition, right? So when you add a second point of view to challenge your point of view, you've doubled the number of potential looks at the problem. Now, for 95% of the problems you guys have every day, or 99, I don't think this matters. But for some number of them, it matters. And I would say, if you think 2 or 3 decisions a month that are really high impact decisions, that's 24 to 36 decisions a year, right? So for 36 or 25 or 30 things a year, this might be a useful way to think about it. For 750 other things a year, probably not a problem. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of adding a contextual quotient. My belief is you take intelligence in the leader, plus a great degree of domain knowledge, and you add to that some additional context and experience. That's what you get out of advisors. That's what you get out of coaches. That's what you get out of people that help you, is they add some experience and some context. They bring more transactions to that transaction that you're doing, and they bring potentially a different challenging point of view to yours. Not to argue with you, but to enrich your view of it. So that's kind of the winning equation in my mind, is if you can take a smart person who knows a lot about their business and help them see it differently if that's useful in the moment, and then add transactional kind of data to it, like, well, I've done that 15 times, you've done it 5. So between the two of us, we've done it 20. That's way better than 5 or 15. And so, what I say is find conversations that challenge your point of view. If you're talking to people that just agree with you all the time, I would be very, very cautious of that. So whoever you have in your life that helps you mentor and coach you, just make sure that they disagree with you or challenge your viewpoint. Why do you see it that way? What is it about that makes you want to act that way? And I think you'll be surprised that when you're forced to answer that question, it's a little bit different than what you had in your head. So this is why talking to yourself doesn't work, because when it comes out your mouth, it's a little bit different than you thought it was in your head. And I think you've all seen that. There's this notion, I think I get to it in this next chart, called committed listening. Yes, committed listenership. So if we agree, or even if you could believe that success is the sum of the decisions we make plus good execution, then we got to diagnose those problems. Somebody went through this almost exactly like I had it. I think it was Kevin. Diagnose that decision. So most of the time, smart people diagnose and decide. My suggestion is there's two other steps in here, which for the most important decisions are useful, which is dialogue and debate. Dialogue is literally the act of talking about it and getting it out of you and getting it into language so that you can actually see what you think about it. I would argue that we don't think the same in our head as we think when we're forced to say it, even a little bit. Remember this, your entire game you guys are playing is a game on the margin, right? Nobody here is going to lose by 100 points. Question is, are you going to win by 1 or 2, right? So we're looking for marginal advantage. This is a really competitive game. We're looking for marginal advantage, being a little better than you were last quarter, last year, than your competitors. Okay, I'm not suggesting anybody here, like I said, is going to get blown out by 100 points. This is a question of marginal advantage on the margin with the same amount of time. So if we take problems, we say we diagnose them, we have dialogue about them, we have healthy debate, and then we decide, then making decisions is really about being clear and believing, right? Having real clarity and having deep belief that you've arrived at the place that resonates with you in that decision. The easy decisions are, your team will make them. The hard decisions are the ones that come to you. Communicating those decisions, I think, is a matter of confidence that you've analyzed it right and you believe it. And I know that all of us have been in the presence of folks who've communicated things to us where it kind of looked like they weren't sure what they were saying. And, I say when you walk out that door to your team or to the press or to your customer, it's a good idea to have gotten real clarity, real conviction. I think you communicate with more confidence. I think that's one of the things leaders get paid to do, is communicate with confidence. So again, these are designed to sort of push on you and start the fire here. Talking to yourself doesn't challenge your point of view. Two minds are almost better than one. Committed listenership is sort of like the difference between hitting tennis balls against a wall and hitting tennis balls against another good player. Like the wall never knows if you hit 7 of them in the dirt in a row, right? But another good player, after you hit 3 bad ones, you're like, I need to get my shit together here. I'm hitting against a good player. It pulls for something different. So when somebody's listening to you, committed to the quality of your dialogue, it pulls something different out of you than you talking to your windshield on the way to work, right? So that's what committed listenership is. And you can get people to work with you to be committed listeners of you. Not necessarily even that they have a lot of brilliant advice, but they'll listen to you for clarity. They'll listen to you for impact. They'll listen to you in a way that makes you speak that well, or they kind of go, huh? That's committed listenership. You want to get some of that around you. And this is possible to have on your team and your board as well. Dan? I don't know. What do you guys think? Have you ever had a coach or a mentor who didn't know a lot about what you were doing, but just was a great pull for you? Yeah? What's that? That's... Yeah, I mean, it's a super good question. I mean, I think Dan's question has inherent in it the assumption of their ability to advise you, right? And the ability to advise is useful, but I still think sometimes, I would argue that there's a reasonable amount of therapy that is committed listening. Not to throw a bunch of psychologists under the bus at all, but I think if you really think about reflective therapy, it's committed listening. Why do you feel that way? Tell me more about that. And a lot of those problems are self-solved through that conversation. But you gotta believe you're having an important conversation with a committed listener. Please. Could not agree more. I mean, anything that gets it out of your head for me. Right? I just think we overestimate the clarity with which we keep things in our head.
Ran the entire design team at Google, and before that, the entire design team at Yahoo. drive design into their organizations that you're ever going to find. And, she's free. Paul's a 3-time ex-CFO. If you need help structuring a venture debt transaction or building a great finance team or getting somebody to interview a CFO candidate, you're not going to find anybody better than he is. Jon, probably one of the leading CEO coaches in the Valley, now joining the Coastlet team as an operating partner. So this is us living this commitment to venture assistance, right? To being here for you to help in any way that we can. And for some of you, some of the time, that's going to be great. And for some of you, some of the time, you're still going to want to hire a coach on the outside. Maybe you think we're going to, as I'm fond of saying, rat you out to your investing partner. Maybe you just don't want to share your deep, dirty secrets with somebody who works for one of your investors. So then the question to you, and we got a couple people here who wanted to get into the conversation, is how do you choose the right person? And that's why I was asking this question, right? Do they have to be a multi-time ex-CEO who used to teach at Santa Clara Business School? Or can it be somebody from a more behavioral point of view who may not have the same kind of experiential background, but sort of can draw other kinds of questions out?
Yeah, I mean, you guys have probably read $1 Trillion Coach. I mean, Bill Campbell really started this whole thing a long time ago, right? And he didn't really consider him a professional coach. He was just a great committed listener, a great advisor, had really relevant experience. I would say, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, I would say find people that challenge you. Just find people that challenge you. Just find people that you notice your thinking is better around them. You're actually a little uncomfortable in the conversation. Like, first tee jitters when you're hitting a tee shot with a really good golfer or something like that. Like there should be some butterflies, some nervousness around that conversation because you respect that other person's ability to listen for bullshit out of you or for like the same old thing you've always said.
One recommendation for Costa dinner, the organization. The Costa invested with us, right? I never really knew you guys were all available. Nobody sat me down. Maybe I'm the only founder who didn't get like a tutorial. You guys, once you sign the deal, you get the money. There should be some half a day at Costa where you explain all these things. I don't know if the other founders here were giving a tutorial that I wasn't, but to me this is like
you're the only one who didn't get it.
Yeah.
That's what this is, right?
Martine, we were just trying to figure out what country you were in that day. And it was a list of 11, by the way, that were possible.
Somebody asked me what we were going to cover in this section, and I think it was somebody who was in my session last year, which was an actual attempt on my part to be useful. And I sort of laughingly said, well, today is going to be marketing for me and Jon. No, I mean, we're going to try and cover some useful stuff, but we do a terrible job of making the companies in our portfolio aware of the resources that we can make available, which is part of why I just gave you the infomercial that I gave you. I'm also in the process of pulling together the first edition of a Coastlet newsletter. It's going to be super short and sweet, just pointers to interesting articles or podcasts or videos that you might find some value in. But we will use that as a way to highlight one of the operating partners in each edition also, so you can get some sense.
And Scott's, Scott's new to the team as well. So a very, very experienced operating executive.
There's a woman joining the team who's going to be focused on PR, and she's going to spend about 80% of her time with the portfolio also. Tim, did you have a question or a thought or a comment?
Exact same line.
Okay. Yeah.
I wonder if you guys could speak to the contrast that I've observed between effective CEO coaches who've been CEOs.
Uh-huh.
And like I've done a survey to it, and I love seeing another model who's been around effective
Yep.
CEOs, and very effective as coaches.
Yeah, I can't speak to the first one because I've been a CEO 3 times and also around a couple good ones that I learned a lot too. When I coach as a CEO, I try to not be in that role, right? I'm not pretending I'm CEO when I'm coaching. And I think, let me give you an idea of let me tell you one man's opinion. This is the definition of a dangerous CEO coach, is a former CEO who's not finished being a CEO yet. That to me is problematic. That's a person that actually wants to run your company through you. It's the frustrated parent in the stands of the 11-year-old playing baseball who never made the college team, him or herself. So I'm worried about operating folks who actually haven't ended their operating career emotionally and ready to give back, ready to teach, ready to contribute. And they get just as big of a kick at their CEOs winning as they maybe did when they were playing the game. But I think both would work. I mean, Dan's been he was the COO of Box. It's probably bigger than 99% of the CEO jobs in the world, but just slightly different. Slightly different. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so we stumbled on a trick that I think might be useful. I first looked for somebody to facilitate executive team offsite.
Uh-huh.
And first person wasn't really good. Second person, she was brilliant. And then she stayed on
Yep.
coach. And she also knew my executive
Yep.
team and knew the dynamics and had a much better familiarity
Yeah.
with the team. So
Gave you a trial. Yep.
feel that person for a few times with the executive team and then
Yeah, probably a quarter of my clients came from doing an event. And from that event, the chemistry seemed right, the relationship seemed right. I mean, to me, the most important thing in coaching is trust, right? It's creating a trusted space where you can tell the truth, be honest, it feels safe. Without safety, I don't think we get honesty, and without honesty, we don't get any useful dialogue around the real problems. I mean, if we want to bullshit each other, we don't need to pay for it. Right? You can figure out other ways to do that. So to finish this up, and again, we'll jam through this and we'll completely chat about it. Again, I think in a high-stakes poker game where people are writing you 7, 10, 25, $50 million checks, you want every advantage you can get. I mean, I happen to be a competitive golfer, so I know how that sport works. And most of the people on the PGA Tour now have a trainer, a nutritionist, a swing coach, a travel manager. I mean, literally, like anybody they can buy, they're playing for $2 million a week. So their view is, if there's another resource I can get relative to the size game I'm playing, I'm getting it.
So the big difference there is they only play, I'm going to demonstrate my ignorance.
Be careful now.
4 days.
4 days, very good.
So often,
Very good. 4 days a week.
the rest of the time they're practicing anyway.
That's correct.
So they can have like 6 coaches lined up
Yep.
while they're just out on the range hitting balls, but these guys never get to practice.
Right.
Every day is game day.
Totally agree.
How much time is it worth investing with some, third wheel who doesn't really?
Yeah, I mean, Dan raised a good point. I mean, they're using these people all the time. I can tell you that I think the average level of engagement with a coach or an advisor, at least in my world, is kind of what I call the better part of a half day a month and then a single follow-up. So my structure in coaching CEOs has always been to get 2 to 4 hours with them once a month. 7 to 11 in the morning, 2 to 6 in the afternoon, 2 to 5 in an afternoon, 9 to 12 in the morning, and then again about a couple weeks with a quick follow-up call, and then we rinse, lather, and repeat every month. So I think my personal view is that one solid, phones off, whiteboard available, 2-3 hours to go after the really important issues. That's been my 10-year average of kind of engagement size. Now that feels like a lot compared to the fact that your calendar doesn't have any natural 3-hour gaps in it. But I also think that, there's such leverage in this if you get it right, that it should compete. Should compete for some things that don't have the same amount of leverage on your calendar. Again, just my experience. So as my friend Jeff Miller said, you might not have time to do it right, but you'll have time to do it again. So that's the fire starter on performance coaching, CEO coaching, leadership coaching. And then Dan and I have another topic we're both fond of, which is executive teams. So we did a dinner in San Francisco a couple of months ago that I think a few of you were at. But we, again, did some fire starters for this as well. And a lot of this is stuff that you've seen in the last 2 days around, people wanting to join something. I have a belief that probably the single largest correlation to creating value is the quality of exec teams. And the single largest quality of index to quality of exec teams is quality of CEO. But we do have great CEOs without great exec teams. I think it's very rare to have a great exec team without a great CEO. So I think it goes one way, it doesn't go the other. And CEO alone, I think, is insufficient to kind of create the value that y'all are swinging for here, that we're playing for with this kind of capital. Design for the structure, not the person. I think, CEOs ask me a lot, how long should my org chart last? Dan, I'd love your thoughts on this, but 18 months to 2 years. I mean, if you can see an org chart the last 2 years in a fast growth scenario, I don't think you can see 5, and I certainly wouldn't want you to only see 6 months.
I don't know if there's anybody in this room who's spent enough time with me to be able to repeat back my answer to this question. What's the answer to the question?
Yeah, you basically said that org charts should basically not change that much, but business process is a primary tool to use.
Wait, org chart design or people in boxes? Okay, design.
Yeah,
Fair.
I'm a big believer in strategize, organize, deputize, supervise. So, like, figure out what the hell you're trying to accomplish. Your strategy is a hypothesis for how you're going to win in the future. That tells you what's important. Design your org chart to align your resources to the things that are important. Then don't change it unless your strategy changes.
Totally agree.
Why not? What do people hate more than anything else in the world? Change. Who moved my fucking cheese? People hate change. It's very disconcerting, right? It undermines our productivity, our self-confidence, our connectivity in the organization around us. But don't change your org chart unless you change your strategy.
I think that's what I meant here, Dan, by design structure for company, not person.
Then you deputize, right? Never design your org chart around humans. Design your org chart around your priorities, which link to your strategy.
Yep.
Then you put the right humans in the right boxes. And then if you've got a need for some kind of cross-functional endeavor, or there's something that's not working about the way your org chart is designed, you put a business process solution in place. You got an office in the UK, and you're trying to figure out, does the CS leader in the UK report to the GM of Europe, or do they report to the CS leader in San Francisco? Well, the answer is yes. 2 to hire, 1 to fire. They report to both, but I don't put that on my org chart. That's a business process solution.
Yeah, a couple of things you're saying, I think, go in direct opposition to some of the things we've talked about over the last 2 days, but also something that I know my dad says, which is, there's 2 separate points I want to talk about. I'd love your guys' thoughts on both of them. One is about the value of compounding in long term. So if we focus on 2-year designs and we try and hire for 2 years, we kind of avoid that 6-year compounding benefit that you get from somebody who's been in the same role or at the same place. And so I'd love your thoughts on how to marry those 2 ideas of taking a long view, which like Sam Altman talked about today.
Yep.
And then the other one is like something my dad always says, and he talks about this when they were at Sun, is like when they were hiring people at Sun, they just designed roles for people. Like they didn't have a role for Bill Joy. They were just like, he's the smartest possible engineer around. Let's just find something for him to do. And he talks about this a lot.
Yeah, and there's a few Bill Joys, right? They're rare.
Sure.
Yeah, they're rare. I've seen a lot of non-Bill Joys that org charts were designed around that were a disaster. So you're making my point, is that if you have somebody worthy of breaking the org chart, do it. But if you find a screwed up org chart, you'll usually find a person who wanted a job that the company didn't need. And then everything rotates around the wrong axis, to Dan's point. And but the compounding thing, Neil, I think is an interesting thing. What I'm saying is, I think in fast growth companies, I mean, my view is it's hard to hire the people in year 2 that you could get in year 4. I mean, if you're if you're 2 million in year 2 and you're going to be 25 million in year 4, I don't know that 25 million size people will join you in year 2. They might, right? They might. But I'm just saying, if you hold yourself to, hey, I need to have people that are going to stay 6 years. A, I don't know if you can get them, and B, I don't know whether they're the right people at that point.
To build on that,
Good points.
3 years, by the way. Now, I'd like them to stay for 10.
Yep.
But I'm going to assume they only last for 3.
Yep.
And that's because I need them to be able to do a job that's 4x the size of the job they're going to do today 2 years from now, assuming I'm growing 100% year over year. And in those 2 years, I'd like to hope they will grow enough that they can double one more time. So now they're doing a job that's 8x the size that I need them to do today. And the problem is, the job today is a hands dirty, down in the muck, scrappy, we're a little company job. And the 8X job is you've got an EA and you've got a P card and like we're a real company job. And finding people who can do
that's my
both of
point.
those is really hard.
And that's really my point.
Do you want to bet that they'll grow? Hell yes. I'm totally about the compounding factor, but I generally think it's very hard to do that. I think you're much better off hiring the person that you can hire today, hope that they'll be around for 3 years, and then just assume that you're either going to have to layer them or split their job or replace them if that's what comes to it.
But if you thought about how when you design an org chart, how long could you imagine it lasting? 2 to 3 years seems to be those right answers. I wouldn't hold yourself to 5. I don't think we can predict that. But I also wouldn't let yourself get off in the hook on 1. That's all I'm saying. As a,
The other half of the deal, there was the compounding piece.
and then there was the Bill Joy special franchise player jobs, which are like, if you got those, hallelujah.
In response, generally speaking, to questions from you guys, I've written a bunch of this stuff down, and now that John's on board, he and I are going to go to town on this shit. I have written a piece on discipline around personnel's related stuff. Discipline around titles, discipline around org structure, discipline around promotion, around compensation. In my view, there are two kinds of people in the world. Now, what do they say about me, Neil? Do you remember?
Many things. Which one?
That guy is not always right.
But he's always sure.
So remember the not always right part. I really believe there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who wake up every morning and say, I'm solving today's problems today, and I could give a shit what the long-term ramifications are. And those people will do anything they have to do to sign somebody, and they'll do anything they have to do to keep somebody. They'll give them a title, they'll give them more money, they'll give them more stock, they'll give them the corner office, they'll do whatever they have to do. And there are people who wake up every morning and say, I'm building for 20 years from now, and the only way I'm going to build for 20 years from now is if I treat everybody fairly, if I treat everybody like they know what everybody else is paid, if everybody comes to work every day and says, I work for an organization that is fair and equitable and rational and predictable. And if that means that some guy walks out the door because I won't negotiate with terrorists and give him a raise, then he walks out the door. And if she is my most valuable employee, then she's my most valuable employee, and I still let her walk out the door. Because the other 100 people
Culture issue.
know that I'm not going to do anything special for her. I'm going to treat her fairly and equitably and evenly and the way I treat everybody else.
And it's cultural, ultimately a cultural issue.
Cultural,
Yeah.
for sure. But I'm a 20-year kind of guy, not I'll do whatever I have to today. And to be fair, I've founded 2 companies. I've worked in a lot of companies with less than 20 or 30 employees, and I know what reality is like. I know how hard some of this stuff is. But once you give up your principles in pursuit of sort of a Band-Aid solution,
Slippery slope.
Problem, it's a very slippery slope.
Yeah, please.
One point, well, you said organizational structure is good once you get your strategy. I think it's important to recognize that sometimes we don't have our strategy figured out.
Yeah.
And especially early on.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Open. So my experience is actually to define things by objectives
Mm-hmm.
rather than strategy. So there's these 5 different things we want.
Some non-people organizing principle is the point. Some non-people organizing principle.
Well, you could call that the strategy, but
Your strategy is just a hypothesis for how you're going to win in the future.
Yeah.
but some,
People think it's this big complicated thing. It's nothing complicated. It's your hypothesis for how you're going to win in the future. Sometimes the future's 3 months from now.
Yeah.
Like, we're still in this very early phase. We're tacking a lot. We don't know what the 5-year vision is, but we have a hypothesis for what we have to do in the next 3 months to win. And I know you have that. And I know that that's how you drive your thinking, right?
yeah, I'm just saying, in my experience in the early days, is
You're not there yet, right?
short hypothesis, 3-month hypotheses, and pursue multiple hypotheses in parallel.
100%.
And it's only now that we have line of sight to the market that I have a strategy in my mind and I have to go.
Anybody know the story of AutoCAD? Autodesk? None of you?
The triangles.
No, it was they had a brilliant strategy. There were 14 founders of Autodesk. You know what their strategy was? They each wrote a piece of software. And then they tried to sell all 14. People bought AutoCAD. They're like, okay, AutoCAD it is. And thus Autodesk became about AutoCAD. But there's a reason that it's desk. The idea was they were going to just throw everything they could at the wall. So yeah, who knows? If you think you have a 5-year strategy on day 1 of your startup, you're just probably wrong.
Yeah, I think one thing is that the people you hire in year 1 should probably not last in year 3. They're probably
Some will.
Like when you were a seed stage startup, you had 5 people sitting in a room.
Yeah.
Very much ago. We were there 4 years ago.
You've been there.
You have to manage people out and you have to be okay with that. You have to put a business in how to do that.
The team has to serve the business. I mean,
I just hire very senior people that want to do another startup that have already done. They know all the stages.
They do.
You don't have to get rid of them. And you can give them a VP title. And you can put
and you're you.
hire super senior people.
Well,
And they're coming to work for you.
what's the answer? Part of the answer is.
Low-level stuff.
Yeah,
They're
but
happy to have
Part of
you
the
in
answer
lab.
is.
They're expensive.
You can hire this.
That's right. I said, and it's you.
They'll come work for you.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have that flexibility.
Yeah.
The person.
On a later startup if it's their third, fourth, fifth
No, but
Yeah.
when you start
Yeah,
your
for that
first
group of people
company-
doing their fifth startup, this is a luxury.
when
Small
you're
group.
starting your first company, your executive staff is your roommate.
Yeah.
It's the group manager at Google that you went to the movies with last week and you thought was cool. You know, you're somebody. People will come work for you because they want to work with you.
And that's what I mean by aspire. That's what I mean by aspire to hire people that shouldn't logically join you, right? Those are some of the greatest hires where it didn't make, I mean, we got a couple recruiting folks in the room. I'm sure they've made pitches to people whose first 17 answers was no. And then somehow they joined, and those turned out to be amazing. This beware consolidation, this to me is about this epidemic of C-level titles, CPOs and CROs and CMOs and C everything else's. I just would be careful if I were you as an early stage CEO in consolidating your organizations too quickly. I mean, the reality is I'd like to stay a little closer to the action, like have customer service and revenue report to me for a while before I feel like I have to put that into a CRO job together. Okay, so there's a massive title inflation on LinkedIn that's driving, in my mind, kind of this C phenomena. And I think the downside for CEOs is they consolidate functions into a single executive far too quickly. Now, you can debate that with me, but I think this comes about more through title inflation and career management than it does an actual need for a C-level employee at that stage. Yes?
You comment how this might break down or be challenged by non-CEO founders, co-founders. So a lot of times when you design around people and not around strategy.
Oh, like a founder that wants to be CTO or something like that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I was imagine those examples are all individual, and I'd have to know more about it. But maybe if Dan wants to grab it, I don't quite understand what you mean. Meaning lots of founders. Where do you put them all?
No, what I mean is that when you have an executive team,
Uh-huh.
and one or two of those people on the executive team are co-founders, there's a certain level of, and they're on the board,
Yeah.
right? And they know the salaries of the other
Yeah.
executives, but those executives don't know
Yeah.
the salary. It's not depending on the situation.
Yeah.
But I've seen before where sometimes
Yeah.
there are issues with
Yeah.
power structure and
It-
confidence levels and that impact the executive team, and that you have to.
I would say there's I've seen many challenges around large founder teams and how those evolve, and it's difficult. I mean, stuff changes. That team isn't, people emerge out of that are more important or more senior, or it's rare that stays perfect as the company grows. But I think it's a pretty individual situation to get some advice on. But large founder teams are challenging over time. Please.
Two thoughts related to your point, one of them. We should all aspire to a world in which the best people on the planet want to work for us.
Exactly.
Our success as leaders is most highly correlated to being able to recruit amazing people.
Exactly.
Your ability to recruit amazing people is highly related to your personal brand. So you should be super thoughtful about your personal brand. You should be very thoughtful about what people who used to work for you are out in the world saying about you. You should be very thoughtful about what those people who used to work for you go on to do. Right? I always say I measure myself on three things. Did I do what I said I was going to do? So for 25 years, I've been accountable for a revenue number and an operating income number. Did I deliver? Do the best people on the planet want to come work with me? And do the people who used to work with me go on to do amazing things? Did they go on to be CEOs? Did they go on to run big organizations? There was a day where the product leader of every major enterprise SaaS company in the Bay Area, so NetSuite, SuccessFactors, Workday, they were all people who used to work for me at Intuit. And I took tremendous pride in it. But it was good for me, right? So think about how you're affecting the world around you from a personal brand point of view, because it makes a huge difference on the kind of people you can hire. You can hire amazing people because you have a great personal brand, because you've done a bunch of amazing stuff. And we should all aspire to that for sure. We all screw up.
To that point, I think leverage your strengths and cover your weaknesses when you hire. If you're really strong at something, you may not need to hire it, but if you're weak at it, you definitely have to hire it. Okay, so people come to CEO-ship through all kinds of different areas. Some people come through product, some people come through the field, some people come through finance or customer service or design or any other area. So you are formerly something else unless you're just a raw founder with no functional business experience. But when you come to that job through a function, it's highly likely you know more about that function than others. Just be thoughtful about covering your weaknesses. Dave told me this 4H's thing. I've thought about this for a long time. Hire to hard work, humility, honesty, and hunger. And as much as I believe that, I completely believe the opposite of it. Meaning, I'm pretty sure I want to hire to this. I'm completely sure I want to not hire to the opposite of it. You know, I don't know anybody who wants somebody who doesn't work hard, isn't humble, you know, doesn't tell the truth, and doesn't really want to accomplish anything. So this was a useful kind of 4H's for me. And I wish this cliche wasn't as true as it is, but it is. A's hire A's and B's hire C's. And I've been waiting for this one to disprove itself over the 20 years, and it has turned out to be chiseled in stone for me. I'm guessing it's chiseled in stone for some of you as well. I think when you lower the bar, when you hire an executive that's not to your caliber, they're not going to hire somebody next that's anywhere near your caliber. And unfortunately, this is a disease. And I would just encourage you to do whatever it takes to not start down that road. This is this secure in themselves stuff, right? That's right.
People who are not self-confident want to surround themselves by people who make them feel good.
Right.
That's why people who lack self-confidence hire people who in turn are less capable than they are, whereas people who are really self-confident will hire people who are better than them.
Because they're not at risk, right? Their credibility, their validation is not at risk by hiring somebody great around them. And this is what I mean by secure in themselves. If you hire executives who really have fundamentally a lot of confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, track record, all those things, they're going to tend to want strength around them. And if you get somebody who, to Dan's point, still needs to make sure that they're better than everybody else, you're going to get that cascading effect. They're hard to find. Listen, none of the stuff on these charts from the beginning is easy, but we're not, if it was easy, it wouldn't be this room of people, it'd be another one. Time? So you can read the rest of this. I want to just say that I am disappointed often with the amount of time that CEOs spend with their executive teams. I almost feel like there's a how little time can I spend with my executive team goal, and I feel the opposite. I just think that executive teams and CEOs need to spend time together, building trust, building dialogue. If any of you are familiar with Pat Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, it starts with relationship, which leads to trust and vulnerability, which leads to the ability to have hard conversations about difficult things. Healthy debate, healthy conflict leads to the only thing I think matters, which is shared commitment. So if any of you know that triangle, the third layer in that triangle is called shared commitment. And if I could find a way to measure shared commitment, I would buy all those stocks and I would sell all the ones that measure low. Because that to me is the key critical takeoff point for an executive team, is authentic shared commitment, having not agreed at the beginning. So for any of you Intel people, it's disagree and commit. But to me, that starts with spending time with exec teams, getting to know them, getting vulnerable, getting a trust level that's extraordinary, and then moving from there to the ability to routinely discuss difficult things with different points of view and arrive at shared commitment. And then the rest of Pat's diagram is simple: accountability, focus on results. But to me, the critical layer in Pat's diagram is layer 2 to 3, healthy debate leading to shared commitment. It only comes from spending time together. So I would encourage you that that's the best time you could spend. It's not like, wasted time or we can't spend that time together. Great teams spend time together. I've done this for 100 companies over 10 years. Great teams spend time together. I just did a 4-day executive offsite for a public company last week. There was a lot of unstructured time, but this is a team that goes to war together, hand in hand, elbow to elbow, locked in, one group of men and women walking down the field. And they've been doing this for years. And by the way, their stock's gone from $65 to $295 in the last 3.5 years. So this is a team that spends time together, plays together, eats together, talks together, and they solve hard problems together. So please, if nothing else, start investing in your teams by spending time with them. And I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think programming, this has been known a long time in software, right? That world-class programmers are 10 times better than the next layer. I think executives follow the same rule. So that was the Firestarter stuff. Just for your information, that framework right there and that framework right there are in this book on the table. So if you want to read about them. By the way, I'm not taking any of these books home, so if you want to take 2 of them and give them to one of your teammates or something, please do, because I don't want them to stay on the tables. That's it for the Firestarter stuff. Unfortunately, we're nearing the end of the time. We needed 2.5 hours for this. We got 45 minutes. So, but we can continue these conversations with you individually, together, with Scott, with Dan. But this is important stuff.
We're here to help in any way that we can, and that goes for the entire Coastlet team. We're all motivated around the same goal and the same objective, which is purely and simply to make your companies as successful as possible. So don't hesitate to reach out. If there's anything you need help with, reach out to whoever you know.
Yeah.
And just tell them what you need. We know each other pretty well, and we'll guide you to the right person within the organization. And if there isn't the right person within the organization, we'll just tell you that, and we'll help you find somebody else.
Listen, I have incredible regard for how difficult the jobs are that you do every day. I did it for 20 years myself. It's a really hard job. Do not be afraid to raise your hand and ask somebody to be in the dialogue with you. There's a lot of people that would enjoy being helpful. Okay? Thanks.